Hey, deserving listeners, Big Ed and Liz on 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
You know, how he found her. Maybe he was in the same area, you know, at a bar and happened to walk by and see her and stopped by and it upset her, you know, and they got into an altercation. So Liz ended up coming over and we sat in the patio and just, she was upset.
All right, so a little bit more data about Liz's past. What we hear from Ed, anyway, is that she was out and her ex happened to walk in where they were, and there was an altercation. Maybe there was some violence, maybe there was some arguing. Doesn't sound like a good thing. Is this ex-partner, is he controlling? Is he violent? I don't know. Certainly there's some, yellow flags of that given the story. And that would point us in this direction of, has Liz experienced a lot of trauma in her past that is affecting how she views Ed? I have no idea, but let's continue.
You know, and I started asking, I think I asked one too many questions and it pissed her off. So then she took off and
what
then...
did you ask that pissed her off?
Okay, so according to Ed, he asked one too many questions. I'm guessing Ed was being jealous and he was exhibiting that behavior we saw on the telephone, or we heard in the telephone, which happens later after this. I reacted to that the infamous telephone call between him and Liz. I'm guessing it was least in that direction, and he was jealous and he was putting her down or making her feel small, controlling, acting entitled, like he has the right to question her and interrogate her, and then that bothered her. So now let's see if Ed can admit that he did something wrong there. Again, we don't know what happened, but we could imagine.
I'm just like, hey, are you still in communication with this guy? How did he know where you were at? That sort of thing. Like, how did he know that? And
so I'm guessing, again, I wasn't there, that it wasn't just those questions and it wasn't in that tone. If you were just asking those questions in that tone, then I'm guessing she would say, I already told you, he didn't know I was there. I don't know how he found us. And no, I'm not still with him. But if she got, angry and stormed off, then I'm guessing that, again, I have no idea, but I could imagine Ed being very forceful and very entitled in his speech and putting her down, making her feel small, and then she left.
I was probably a little bit overzealous and, wanting to know, what was going on and slightly jealous. Yeah, I was like, hey, what's going on? This was a girls' night out.
So this is troublesome. I've seen this in domestic violence or intimate partner violence perpetrators before, where they will continue to exhibit the behavior because they have attachment injuries and attachment defenses that are along the lines of intimate partner violence and control and verbal abuse. But he will also kind of admit, you'll hear in his language, yeah, I might have was a little overzealous. Well, that's an interesting way of putting it, right? Especially when we hear the conversation. It was probably in that direction. We wouldn't call that overzealous, right? We would call that abusive. We would call that unreasonable. We would call that aggressive. We would call that name-calling and being unfair. We wouldn't call that overzealous. So what's the concern that I have? Well, the concern is that if some of that abusive behavior was exhibited by him, and he frames it in his mind of, yeah, I might have been a little overzealous. And yeah, I get jealous because I really like her. That is a frame of mind that upholds the intimate partner violence behavior, the domestic violence behavior, the abusive behavior. It's a narrative of just like, yeah, sometimes I get a little overzealous. Everyone gets overzealous sometimes, but it's because I'm really into her. That's why I did it. It's a justification for abuse, which usually is one of the pillars that holds up abusive behavior in individuals.
And then he shows up, what a coincidence, that sort of thing.
Do you accuse her of still being in contact with her ex?
Well, she had told me it had ended about 2 months before we started, before I started seeing her. So my fear was that she would, go back to him,
But again, if I understand the situation right, she was out with her friends and then her ex showed up, there was an altercation, and then Liz called him. So if something is going on, then why would she call him? So now usually, and I've said this before, I've treated a lot of intimate partner violence perpetrators. I've treated a lot of abusive individuals, whether in individual or couples or family therapy or in domestic violence treatment. And usually what I found, not always, there were psychopaths, there were sadists, but the majority of the perpetrators that I have treated have a lot of attachment injuries, and they have a lot of fear because of the way they were treated growing up. And when there's a threat, they just have this tendency or this habit of reacting to that fear in an abusive way. So it doesn't justify the abuse, but the abuse comes from a place of fear of loss, fear of being rejected. And so he seems to be exhibiting that. I don't know, though.
I might not ever hear from her again. I think I might have blown it. If Liz and I don't work out, I'm done.
So my hypothesis is that he has 3 different modes, maybe other modes we haven't seen, but we've seen 3. And they're all immature black and white thinking modes, probably based on his childhood. And he is now in the second mode that I've identified, and I don't know, I'd have to ask him if this makes sense to him, of I'm bad and the world is bad. I am worthless and other people will never love me. So he goes from total optimism and total charm and a little bit in denial, a little bit chasing the fantasy and then when things go really wrong, he's like, I'm worthless, everything is falling apart, no one's going to ever love me, and I'm just going to give up. But then there's this third mode that he goes into where he is thinking, I am superior, I am good, and other people are bad. And when something is bad happening in my life, it must be because of someone else and I'm going to attack them. So he seems to exhibit behaviors that are consistent with those 3 modes. And now that he went from everything is good, everything is optimistic, everything is hopeful, I'm chasing the fantasy, things, Liz said I'm boyfriend material, everything's going to work out. Boyfriend incursion happens, and then he goes to that paranoid place of this must mean that she wants to be with him or that she's still with him or she doesn't really love me. Again, I'm thinking that he has experienced a lot of rejection in his life and he is paranoid about people leaving him and he has traumas and he's being triggered. And then he goes in that third mode of, well, I am superior and I'm entitled and other people are bad. And so I'm going to put her down. I'm going to interrogate her. I'm going to ask her a bunch of questions. I'm going to come from an entitled, aggressive, abusive place. I am good. She is bad. I'm going to punish her, hoping that she will come back into the fold. Of course, that never works. And then she runs away. And then he goes into that other mode of, okay, I'm bad and, other people are bad and I am also bad. I am worthless. No one's going to ever love me. I give up. Now, what we would do in Gestalt therapy or in internal family systems or psychodynamic therapy or there's various different ways of approaching it, but we would want to integrate all those 3, maybe by having conversations between them. Each one of those people, those modes that he has, is trying to help himself. The hurt mode, the pessimistic mode is trying to, all 3 of the modes are trying to deal with rejection. So the optimistic mode is trying to deal with rejection, because there's this nagging thing of like, you're going to get rejected, you're worthless, no one's going to love you. And so the optimistic mode is, well, the way I'm going to deal with that monkey on my back is I'm just going to deny it. And I'm going to say, everything's going to be fine, everyone loves me, I'm awesome, the world is awesome, everything's going to be great. Then when he has the incursion of the boyfriend and other kinds of jealous triggers to him, and we saw this with Rose as well, he still has that monkey in his back. The monkey's saying, you're going to get rejected. No one's going to love you. And look what just happened. We have evidence. And then he goes in this other mode of just like, well, I'm still awesome. I'm superior and I deserve better. And I'm going to punish someone else for, rejecting me. Of course, that doesn't work. And then when things get really off the rails, he goes into this mode, which is the monkey on his back. And then he gives up. Then he just turns around to the monkey and says, yeah, you're right. You know what? I am worthless. And there's really just no point in moving on. Some of you might be able to relate to some of these modes, right? Now, when you watch Ed, we might say, well, we don't like his behavior, so I'm not excusing the behavior, but I am trying to hypothesize as to where it's coming from. Again, total speculation. I'd have to ask him if any of this makes sense.
So I don't know if I told you this about Teddy, that cough.
Yes.
He's actually a non-smoker. I'm just kidding. I can't really tell what Liz's temperature is. I can tell that she, is upset.
So we've seen this before. He would make mistakes, really big mistakes with Rose, and then he would enter into this mode. I am hypothesizing about the 3 modes of Ed, the one being the optimist where everything is good, including himself. The other one being everything is bad, himself and the world and other people, and something in between where he believes he is good and other people are bad and he is there to punish other people. So we've seen him where he will make a mistake with Rose or with Liz, and then he usually goes to that optimistic state where he becomes very accommodating, seemingly on the outside. He will kind of apologize. He will be optimistic and bubbly and in a good mood. But I think he's resorting to that because deep down, he's really trying to avoid rejection. And he believes that I think he prides himself in his charisma and his positive attitude and thinks that that will win the day. And maybe it often does. But the problem is that if you don't really recognize what you did wrong and you don't really apologize, then you are bound to repeat it as he seems to have done with Rose and now with Liz, and who knows what relationships he had before. Hey, deserving listeners, as you all know, I am constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. Well, one of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp. If you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to betterhelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the promo code Kirk because you get 10% off your first month, and it really helps us out. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist, which is great because you deserve it. And I know also that it can be hard to find a good fit, find the right one for you. Well, one of the options available in terms of your shopping is to go to betterhelp.com/Kirk. I've been told you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message your counselor at any time. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. I've also been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy, and you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide. So go to betterhelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month today.
Somebody's mad at me, I run. I either crack a joke or I run away. But
all right, that's interesting. He says, if someone's mad at me, I either crack a joke or I run. Instead of apologizing or having a vulnerable conversation, I either crack a joke and make light of it, distract, move on, or I run. That's interesting. Why would he do that? Well, my hypothesis is he has a deep schema of worries of rejection and that he is rejectable. And if he cracks a joke, he can distract away from what he believes, I'm guessing deep down, that rejection is inevitable. Or he runs because if someone's going to reject you, you might as well run preemptively.
thanks for coming over. I want to tell you that I'm very sorry. It just threw me. I overreacted because I heard girls' night, and then you just happened to run into your ex. And I jumped to all these conclusions.
You made me feel bad about it.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so he's admitting that he jumped to a lot of conclusions and that he was in the wrong. But I don't think he recognizes the way he comes across. I think he is able to recognize, okay, I jumped to conclusions, I was overzealous, as he puts it. But I don't know if he recognizes the entitlement and the superiority and the verbal abuse that he is capable of doing. Now, I don't know about what happened the previous night because we don't have a recording of that, but we do have that recording of the infamous phone call between Ed and her that was posted on the internet and on all sorts of news sites. And he exhibited that kind of behavior. So we could imagine it was at least in that direction, if not a full-blown example of that. And then Liz points out, you made me feel bad about it. You punished me for it. So I think she's trying to accentuate, look, yeah, you made some assumptions, but it was the way that you said the things, the hostility and the abusive language, that's what I have a problem with.
And I'm very sorry for that. I got to trust you. My jealousy is my insecurity, which I got to work on.
Okay, good, but you realize that with Rose, and you apparently have done nothing to work on it. And I think that's what he does. He runs from all three of those states. None of those three states that he has, that he exhibits on the show anyway, has a acknowledgement of, you know what, I think I need to work on myself. I think I need to go to therapy. I think I have some traumas in my past. I think I have some distortions, some paranoia, some entitlement issues, maybe some sexist, maybe some massive insecurity issues. Jealousy is the way it manifests, but deep down, maybe I believe I'm not lovable at all. It makes sense, though. When people think that they're right about not being lovable, they don't really see any point in going to therapy because, they're like, what's a therapist going to tell me? The therapist is just going to, how can a therapist help with a situation like that? Because they think inherently, I am unlovable, I am rejectable, it's never going to work out. And they don't realize that therapy and a secure relationship can actually change the way they see themselves and thus change their defenses.
And this is where I stepped in it with you, is that I'm acting like I'm your boyfriend and we haven't even kissed. I haven't earned that position with you yet.
This is eerie. We saw the exact same behavior. The exact same thing is happening with Liz as was with Rose, where he will make huge mistakes and then he totally falls on his sword and he's just like really nice and really open and like, I made all the mistakes. I'm so sorry. Will you please take me back? I am so sorry. I did something wrong. And then a day later, he's doing it all over again and then he's apologizing again. So that lends itself towards a hypothesis that there's something going on inside of him, some relational trauma, that is causing him to go into denial, have defenses that I've talked about before. When people have these repetitive relationship mistakes, it's usually because of relational traumas that are unresolved and unknown to the individual.
But now that I'm aware of it, I'm gonna work on it because I want this to work.
Again, great, but you said this before. Did you work on it? Did after Rose came back to you, after Liz came back to you, did you continue that mindset? Or did you say, well, I said what I said, now they're back with me, moving on with my normal defenses?
Ed seems very sorry. He was hitting all most of the main points that I wanted to talk to him about. It makes me feel better because I'd like to see where this relationship goes. I just know that if I don't see a change, it's just not gonna work.
Right. So that's rational for Liz to say that of he was hitting all the points. He was apologizing. He didn't blame me for anything. And so it has all the hallmarks of we're good to go and that he won't do this again, or at least he'll have more control over this in the future. But we know from what happens in the phone call that we know happens after this and from the season with Rose that just because he apologizes and takes full responsibility, that doesn't necessarily mean he really understands it. So the question mark is he sincere when he's apologizing and then becomes complacent after he gains the relationship back? Or does he not actually believe the words he's saying and he's just saying it to get the person back and he just knows how to say the right thing to get the right effect out of the world and out of the right response from the other person? Usually it's the latter. Sometimes it's the prior. Usually it's the prior. Sometimes it's the latter. Let's watch.
I will give it another chance.
Thank you.
But your jealousy, it makes me worried. Ask me questions before assuming.
Ask questions before I make an assumption. Got it. So I will do that.
That's one solution. The other solution that I would say, if I were in the room, is, Ed, when you are jealous, when you are upset, express your fear. Do not feel entitled to berate and interrogate her. Under no circumstance is that okay. I've had those conversations with people. I will say, what you're doing is not okay. I'll sometimes even say the word abuse, but I will at least say, what you're doing is not okay. It is destructive, it is unfair, and you need to stop that behavior. I don't beat around the bush about it. I will just label it as what you did and the tone that you had and the words that you used and the emotion you were expressing was not okay. It wasn't just bad communication. It was immoral behavior, and you need to stop it. You're causing other people to run away from you, walk on eggshells around you. You're causing damage. I get where it comes from, but it has to stop. There's a line between bad communication and insults and hurting each other's feelings within a normal range, and then there's crossing a line where you exhibit abuse and entitlement and control and dominance and aggression through words or physicality. And when I see that, I will label it as such because I don't want the perpetrator to confuse what they're doing with just regular kinds of communication issues.
Probably moving forward,
Okay. I haven't been in that many relationships, but I am a jealous person, I'll be honest. I'm a Taurus. We're very passionate, but I have to pull it back because I want to be Liz's boyfriend.
So you see the narrative that he has. He will always, and this is common for anyone under any circumstance, to find a narrative that benefits the self, right? That upholds the self-esteem, or at least the shred of self-esteem that he has, which is, I'm a Taurus and I'm very passionate. That's not an explanation of what happened. What seemingly happened, and what we hear in the phone call in the future, is a reaction of dominance and abuse. That's not passionate. We don't, he uses these terms like, I become overzealous, I'm misinterpreted, I'm passionate, that these are red flags of an abusive pattern, that they will exhibit the behavior and they have to frame it in their mind somehow such that, one, they can justify it to themselves and they can justify it to others. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it, and take care of others because we all deserve it. We really, really do.